The witness, who was then 42, an electronic engineer who lived about 18 miles southwest of Tucson, he operated a small home business doing work for various clients. The property was out in a fairly remote area. He had one neighbor across the road, and there was another unoccupied house further to his north. His property extended about 100 feet from the front of the house, and then there was a barbed wire fence. It had 5 wires, the top one being about 4 feet high. It was usually quite dark out at night, therefore he had installed some floodlights at the front of his house, which he could turn on if needed. On the night of March 13, 1997, he had gone to bed around 10 p.m. and was sleeping soundly. At around 1:10 a.m., now March 14, he was jolted awake by the sound of someone attempting to open the bedroom window, about 6 feet away from where he was in bed. To him, the sound was like nails on a blackboard. The window, which was situated at the front of the house, consisted of double-pane glass with track locks on it, and a set of blinds which were closed. Quote, although I could not see who was trying to get in, I had a profound feeling of being in mortal danger, as if whoever was outside meant to do something terrible to me. Unquote. As quickly as he could, he rolled out of bed, away from the direction of the window, and grabbed his 12-gauge shotgun from the closet where he kept it. At this time, his emotions changed from fear to intense anger and a strong determination to kill the attempted intruder if he was to get inside the room. He pumped a shell into the chamber, which made an audible noise, then ran to the living room window, which was only about 10 feet from the bedroom window. Also on the front of the house was where the switch for the floodlights were located. Quote, I hit the switch and was totally shocked when I saw this thing, which was now moving away from the house towards the fence. I got a pretty good look at the back of it for about 5 seconds. Unquote. The man knew that what he was looking at was not human. Quote, it was about 6 to 7 feet tall and had a large head similar in shape to a football helmet. It was very thin and the arms were quite long. It wasn't exactly running, but it was moving smoothly and very quickly. It reached the fence in just a few seconds and then, without slowing down, it jumped right over the fence like a hurdle jumper in the Olympics and kept on going. Unquote. The man watched as it continued down to the wooded area where the unoccupied house was. Within about 30 seconds, he saw a disc-shaped object rise up from there and move off towards the south. He described that it was about 40 feet in diameter and passed by the front of his house at a distance of about 130 feet, about 60 feet above the ground. It had yellow-reddish lights on the bottom of it and made no sound that he could hear. Quote, my state of mind collapsed into total shock and an overwhelming feeling of fear. All I could think of was what might happen if it came back. I spent the rest of the night virtually paralyzed with fear, hiding behind a couch in the living room, clutching the shotgun. When the sun began to come up, I started to regain some of my senses. Unquote. Next morning, the man went outside to investigate, where he found some footprints. Despite the ground being fairly hard, he managed to find some impressions that were fairly clear. He described that the prints were about 10 to 11 inches in length, very thin, with 3 large toes. Quote, I should have photographed them, but at the time my only concern was my own safety, and I decided to go to a hardware store and get some bolt locks to secure the doors. Unquote. Upon returning from the store, the witness stopped at a coffee shop where he spoke with a friend who mentioned that a UFO had come up the canyon. He was talking about the Phoenix Lights. The man did not come forward with this story for nearly 20 years for fear it would harm his reputation. Quote, as to reporting the incident, I considered it, but was doing some military contract jobs and was afraid that I might be typed as a lunatic or a security risk and lose my clearance. And in addition, I simply had no desire to talk about it. The whole thing was just too disturbing. Eventually, I moved away from that area, and although it's been a number of years since it happened, I'm only recently feeling able to talk about it. Unquote. On February 11, 2009, a married couple and their daughter were seated in the living room area of their Tucson, Arizona home, watching a movie on their television. In the living room, there was a large sliding glass door, which allowed them access to the backyard. The wife was seated in a chair facing the southwest, which had an unimpeded view of the Tucson mountains. There were no homes in that area adjacent to their home, so the view was nearly perfect. At around 9:20 p.m., the wife suddenly noticed something moving about in the sky. It was a strange object, hovering approximately 200 to 300 feet southwest of their backyard. Quote, although I don't remember seeing the object moving at that point, I got the impression that it was moving south to north. The object was complete with two red lights, non-strobing, one in the front and one in the rear. Although it was dark out, I got the impression that the shape of the object was oval. I estimate its altitude at approximately 150 to 200 feet. Unquote. Holding her hand stretched out in front of her, with fingers pointing up, she estimated that from the light to light, the distance between the two lights would have spanned her hand from little finger to thumb. Quote, as I watched, and only a second or two later, the object appeared to explode with a blinding white light. The size of the explosion would be about the size of a pie plate held out at arm's length. The object then accelerated at an unbelievable rate of speed and departed, parallel to the ground, in a northerly direction. There was no noise at any time emitted from this object, nor when it exploded. Unquote. Her husband and her daughter were facing the TV and did not notice the object. The wife alerted them to what she saw, and the three of them ran out into the backyard. There was no sign of it. After about 10 minutes, they returned to their living room. Just as they were about to sit down, the husband heard the sound of helicopters approaching. Once again, the three went out into the backyard where they observed two helicopters moving from the northwest and proceeding in a southeast direction. The husband, who was ex-Air Force, identified these helicopters as military. Although it was dark and the outlines of the choppers were indistinct, the husband guessed that they were both about the size of Blackhawks, maybe larger. Quote, we could see that as the helicopters approached in tandem, they flew directly over the area where I witnessed the object explode. The helicopters were moving very slowly, estimated speed of perhaps 50 miles per hour, and I would estimate their altitude at 200 to 300 feet. They proceeded to pass our house just to the south and continued flying southeast. Unquote. The woman noted that even though there is a lot of military air traffic in the area where she lives, this was the first and only time they had ever seen helicopters flying that route at that slow a speed, especially at night. It's just another case in which military aircraft were sighted around an object, a UFO. This one sounds weird because, according to the witness, it exploded, or it looked like it exploded. In my video of the Rochdale Monster, I talked about how a witness observed a UFO exploding right before this creature was sighted in the community. This weird creature. So I wonder if, I'd like to know if there was something sighted in the area, not unlike a Bigfoot or something like that, around the time that this happened. I think that would be interesting to look into if there was any an increase in Bigfoot activity around the time of the this exploding UFO. It would be interesting to look into and find out, if maybe the two things are related. I don't know. It's weird.